Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we look at the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Ruby Cayenne and I'm sitting in for Dave Frank. We are joined as usual by the North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and feature editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
How you doing, Ruby?
Likewise, Ruby.
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. So how are you guys doing? Are you guys doing well as well?
Doing well. We're excited to have you here with us as a guest host, and I think it's just the stars aligned in that you just happened to pitch us a freelance story a week and a half ago or so that wound up on the cover of this week's journal. So it seems fortuitous.
Yeah, it was good how it worked out like that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came to cover the launch of the I'm gonna butcher the name again. Nigella?
Yeah, Nigella.
Nigella. Okay.
Yeah,
Nigella.
Yeah, of course.
I like this in a shocking twist of events. Thad is going to be interviewing our host.
Yeah, putting me on the spot, guys. It's okay. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, my family has helped to work on the boat. So the boat that's being built in Ferndale, the Nigella, and we have, close connections with the Native communities out here. So my family asked me, hey, this is going on. They know I'm a journalist. Do you want to come down and cover this? I know that they would feel comfortable having you there. Mm-hmm. So I did, and I met Mark, who's the lead builder, and he was just great. We built a connection. And from there, I wrote an initial story on what happened, and this launching of the boat has always been the plan at the end of the build. So I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to attend that because it was a very close-knit event, but through building those connections, through building community, they felt comfortable having me down there and sharing their story. They really want their stories, to be shared. So.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I was so grateful that you reached out about sharing it with our readers through the journal. But just to back up a step, can you tell folks a little bit about these boats and how this project came to be kind of centered in Ferndale?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lead builder, Mark, has been building these kinds of boats, traditional Indigenous Unangan boats, for over 30 years now. And he spent a long time up in Alaska with the people, learning their process, learning their traditions, and integrating with their culture. And through doing that, he came to know, as is known, that these boats had not existed for a very long time. They were all destroyed when Russians came over to the Aleutian Islands to prevent the natives from leaving, and so that they could be enslaved. And it was something that was really important to their culture. That's their seafaring vessels. It's how they would travel from island to island. They would have families, because the kayaks are not big enough for more than one person. So that was how they'd get around. And he talked with tribe members up there, and it was something that he became passionate about. So he started practicing, he started teaching people, and he spent a great deal of effort gathering information and taking his time. And he got to the point where he knew enough about how to build these boats through different resources to be able to do it. So he decided to embark on that journey of creating one of these things. The one that was built here in Ferndale is not the first one to be built. Others have been started by him, and they've all been worked on up in Alaska, but none of them have been able to come to completion, and none of them have been able to get blessed or get put into the water, which is really, that's what you want to see, is these boats being used. So yeah, this was a big deal.
Absolutely. And then I'm curious just to hear, directly from you about kind of the vibe of the event. I mean, it must have, first of all, as the story details, it brought together a lot of people from different communities and different cultures for this ceremony, this launch ceremony. But then, it's also the first time one of these boats has touched the ocean waters in hundreds of years. It must have been something pretty special to be there, on the sand for.
Yes, absolutely. It was, and I use my words as intentionally as I can, so I mean this very genuinely. It was one of the most wholesome and simultaneously powerful events I've ever had the honor of getting to attend. It was a myriad of folks from different Native communities, from non-Native communities, people who'd worked on the boat, people who wanted to support the process, who are really dedicated, because to get to where Fort Ross is quite the journey. You have to go on the really windy one, or there's another highway that's just as windy. So it's a trek. And so everyone who was there really wanted to be there. It was really important for them. And it felt amazing. It felt like a great honor, even just to be there, but then for them to let me take photos and for them to know that I would be writing a piece on it and to be okay with that. I feel really honored. So I have so much respect for everyone who was there, and yeah.
Excellent. Now this isn't really in your piece, but I'm just curious. Was there any concern that one of these things would capsize or sink, or not one of these things, but this thing would capsize and sink when it hit the water?
Yeah, actually, absolutely there was. And so they did something funny, actually, to prevent any kind of a capsize happening. Generally, the boat is loaded up with all the gear. It's all the people, it's the paddlers, it's the passengers, but it also usually is full of food and whatever furs, anything. And it causes it to be quite heavy. So to kind of compensate for the lack of quote unquote gear that may have been in it, and the fact that it was just passengers and just paddlers, they lined the bottom of the boat with sandbags, with really heavy sandbags, quite a few. And that was what prevented it from capsizing.
Gotcha. So that kind of steadies it, having that weight ballast in the bottom. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then I don't think this is in the story either, but what's the plan for this boat now that it's been sea tested and passed?
So yeah, I think for now, Mark is holding on to this one, but as I'd mentioned previously, all of the other ones that are up in Alaska still need to get finished. So now it's his mission to put one of these boats into the hands of all of the people who it comes from traditionally, the Unangan people. So he's going to go up to Alaska and finish all these other boats and just give them to be used, not to be displayed. But for this one, I think for now it's going to remain in the area, and I think he definitely intends to take it out and not just put it up on the wall or anything like that.
Excellent. Well, it's just a wonderful story, and I want to thank you again for for bringing it to our readers. That we had covered parts of the project previously in the Ferndale Enterprise and the North Coast Journal, but we're totally unaware that the launch was happening, that kind of the project had come to fruition, and it's one of those stories that unless somebody approaches us who really has kind of an inside road to the project, we wouldn't have known about and wouldn't have been able to detail for our readers and really commemorate or encapsulate this pretty cool moment in history. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel really honored. So thank you to you guys as well.
Yeah. And it's so wonderful that you're guest hosting today and got to join us to talk about it.
It all worked out very, very beautifully, I'd say. So now that we've kind of wrapped that up, I'd love to talk to you, Thad, about the story that you wrote this week. Could you please just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have a story this week about the 50th anniversary of a U.S. Supreme Court case that had some pretty remarkable local ramifications. And it was a case, I'll say, that I had heard of but I didn't really fully appreciate kind of the reverberations of it. And so the Yurok tribe, somebody from the Yurok tribe approached me and see if we'd have interest in covering the anniversary of this case in advance of a celebration the Yurok tribe is planning for June 11th at Requa at noon. And I said, sure, and kind of got some background materials. And the more I read about it, the more fascinated I became. So the story is, as Jen will appreciate, starts out with one Native woman's desire for salmon cheeks, a Yurok delicacy. And so it was Awak Raymond Matz's grandmother loved fish of all kinds and just had a hankering for salmon cheeks one day, and so sent her boys out to the lower Klamath to gill net some salmon. And so this was in the late 1960s, I think it was 1969. And while they were out, they were cited by a California Fish and Game warden for illegal gill netting and had their nets confiscated. And this had happened before with Arawak, who went by Ray. He passed away last September, so he's no longer with us. But and he had always kind of fought back against these kinds of citations or arrests, saying that he had what he dubbed Indian rights, and that he had rights that were the rights of a sovereign nation to live the way they had always lived, and to fish the way they had always fished. And so he'd always kind of pushed back. But this time, due to kind of a coalescing of factors, he decided that he was going to continue pushing, and he was going to fight this citation and this seizure of his nets in court and keep going. And so with the help of the California Indian Legal Services, which was just then kind of starting up, inspired by the role that attorneys and legal groups had played in the civil rights movement in the South, and they kept losing. They kept getting shot down by California state judges, and they kept appealing. And so finally, this case in 1973 made it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the court ruled that basically the state of California's argument was that because under the Dow's Act, the U.S. government had started selling off some land on what was then the Hoopa and Yurok reservation, but the Yurok portion of it. So because some of that land was being sold to non-native people, that land no longer qualified as what's called Indian country in case law, which carries kind of special rights and responsibilities of a sovereign nation. And so the state's argument was that since 1892, that had not been the case in this section of Yurok territory, and that state laws applied. And what the Supreme Court ruled was that even though the government had sold off plots of land, this is where Yurok people have always been, and that didn't change the fact that selling off of the land didn't change the fact that that was Indian country. And so they basically upheld Ray's fishing rights and the Yurok tribe's fishing rights, and really much more than that, the Yurok's rights to kind of govern its own affairs and make its own regulations regarding fishing. And that case just kind of snowballed into a bunch of legal rulings that have led to what the Yurok tribe is today. And so I spoke with Amy Cordalis, who's actually the grandniece, I think, grandniece of Ray, and the former general counsel of the Yurok tribe. And, she said that this was really the foundation of the modern Yurok tribe. The tribe went on to pass a constitution in 1993 that kind of formalized its form of government, and has kind of steadily grown and progressed since then. But she said it kind of all dates back to that. And a number of other tribal officials have said that this was really kind of a pivot point for not just the trajectory of the tribe, but its formal relationship with the state of California and the federal government.
That's really incredible. I had never heard about that before, so I appreciate you so much for bringing that story to light, because it's really an amazing story. It
really is. And like I said, I knew that there had been this pivotal fishing rights ruling from the Supreme Court, but I really didn't understand how that really led to, to Yurok sovereignty as we know it today. And so I just found that to be really fascinating. And then, Ray Matz and his family, their kind of both dedication to fighting for tribal rights, but then also their interrelations with the salmon in the river are just really profound. And so it was just wonderful talking to Amy Cordalis again about just her experience growing up in this family and hearing these stories of her, her relatives and ancestors fighting to uphold those tribal rights, and then her kind of internalizing that and wanting to carry those fights on further as for her generation, essentially. And so she had talked to me about that she was, I think, a junior in college, and she was back working for the tribe in its fisheries department in 2002 when the catastrophic fish kill occurred due to poor water quality conditions on the Klamath. And that was the point, she says, where she decided she needed to be a lawyer. Before that, she was thinking that maybe she'd be a singer or do something in the arts. And that experience, she just imagined her grandmother and, rolling over in her grave, she said, and just thought of all the things that her Uncle Ray had fought for, and really felt, that weight on her shoulders to pick up that fight and continue it. And it's just remarkable that now at this 50th anniversary, we are on the verge of next year seeing all 4 of the hydroelectric dams in the Lower Klamath River come out, and the river once again, for the first time in 100 years, flow freely to the ocean, which really holds a lot of hope for the recovery of salmon populations in the river. So it's a special time, and it sounds like it's going to be a really neat celebration in Requa on June 11th. And I just want to say before we move on to Jen here that Amy was really expressing this as a celebration of not just tribal sovereignty and not just this case of her granduncle, but really a celebration of the river and the watershed and all the abundance it offers. And so I was really hoping that everybody would come out, native folks, non-native folks alike, come eat some salmon with the Yurok tribe, hear some fish stories, and celebrate with them.
That story has such an amazing message behind it. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's really incredible. And it's exciting. And everyone, June 11th, remember that date.
Yeah.
Wait, will there be fish cheeks?
I neglected to ask the tough questions, Jen, so I'm not sure. But I can try to text Amy and ask if you want.
It was torture proofreading that story. Torture. It's all I could think about until I came home and had fish. Thank God.
Good. Do you have any final thoughts on the story or anything else that you wanted to add before we move on?
No, I think I just I guess I would encourage those who can to attend the event and check it out. And I think it's an important, as we're on the cusp of this really historic moment on the Klamath River with the what's going to be the largest dam removal and river restoration project in U.S. history, imminent at this point, happening in a matter of months. I think it's just constantly important to look back and realize that, this is the culmination of generations of work, and really, with Native communities doing the bulk of it, and just to really respect and appreciate that and honor that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So let's turn to you, Jennifer. So what is happening on the Arts and Features beat? I'd love to hear about it.
So more seafood-driven news is happening in the A&E section of the paper. Specifically, it's happening on the plaza. This weekend, we are doing Oyster Fest. You may recall that Oyster Fest used to be on Father's Day weekend. There used to be that Fish Fest in Trinidad, too. No more. We are doing Oyster Fest this weekend on the 10th, and we are back on the plaza. Long ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, before the pandemic, we did the Arcata Plaza completely covered with tourists and locals and more tourists all coming to drink beer, eat oysters, probably get a sunburn, maybe spill beer on your sandals. That's how we used to do Oyster Fest. And it looks like we're going to be doing it again. I know Thad is not lining up for oysters because he has the sad issue where he's unable to enjoy oysters, but we try to love him through it. However, the oyster fans, it looks like they may be coming back. If the folks at Arcata Main Street are right and their predictions come true, Gil Miracle, who is in charge of organizing the event for Arcata Main Street, this is their biggest fundraiser, so they take it seriously. He's saying that a baseline expectation for crowds are somewhere around 12,000 people. He's hoping for more. And he said he would not be shocked if it hit 15,000, which is around the most we've ever had. Now, last year, you may recall, because we had the 2019 one, big old thing on the plaza, and then we had 2 virtual oyster fests during the pandemic. Virtual, dispersed, people with buckets of oysters in their houses, watching Shoshana tap dance for 8 hours. So then, not actually tap dancing. I shouldn't say that because she actually can tap dance. I meant hosting. But then they shifted back last year to an in-person event, but it was over by the Creamery. Yes, I point this way because it's actually in that direction. The Creamery District one was in a sort of smaller field. There was a $15 admission, and it brought in about 6,000 people. So the fact that it brought in 6,000 people with a $15 charge in a separate location when we were still kind of dipping our toes back into public gathering, because, by the way, COVID still exists, for those of you who are wondering. Miracle kind of thinks, well, given those circumstances, it's not a big leap to get to 12,000 back on the plaza a year later with more kind of consumer confidence. The other thing is that last year it was tough to get not only attendees to be confident. Well, I shouldn't say that. There were 6,000 people. But it was tough to get vendors on board because in order to be a vendor at an event, you have to pay a vendor fee. So you're going to pay a few $100 typically. For Oyster Fest, that's $600 this year. And you have to know that you're going to make at least $600 to break even, right? Not exactly. It's more than that because you need to also pay your staff. You need to pay for all your supplies. So the nut you have to break to make, to break even is quite high depending on what you're selling. And if it's oysters, they ain't cheap. So it's still a little bit daunting to be on the plaza, but some 33 food vendors have hopped on this year. So there's clearly a lot of confidence there. Mad River Brewing has the monopoly on beer, but there's going to be a bunch of local wine, some cider, some other companies doing other beverages. But I'm really interested in seeing how this year's festival comes off. We're also coming back to the in-person blind judged oyster contest. Have you guys ever gone out, have you chased after the winning oyster? I know Thad hasn't. My God, Thad. Ruby, you an oyster girl?
I do love oysters. I don't like them cooked very much, but raw all day.
Okay, so the best oyster title is a status thing and will get you a boost at your restaurant or your truck, as the case may be. However, it's been dispersed in the last couple of years where the judges went on in sort of a caravan from restaurant to restaurant, getting a presentation from the chef, tasting it, judging it, et cetera, and then establishing winners. But it's not really, you can't have a blind test, right? So this year they're returning to the old form. They will be camped out at the old Rita's just off the plaza, and they're going to try probably somewhere around 14, 15 oysters, hot and cold. And you think that's easy, but I've done it. And I will tell you that around oyster 15, you're starting to, your judgment might be slipping.
You're working.
But they're going to be back. Yeah. And actually, the Journal contributor roster has 2 judges on there. Jessica Ashley Silva and Wendy Chan will be judging. So they're going to take it serious. But yeah, I'm very interested to see what happens this weekend. And if you are going down there, I would love to hear from people. Grab my email or my Twitter handle or whatever, and let me know how you enjoyed the festival, what you thought about it, because I'm really curious to see people's reactions to going back to the plaza this year.
Yeah, it's really exciting that it's going to finally be back. So that's great that you were able to write a story and let people know to stay on their toes about it and to get prepared to, as you said, eat lots of oysters and get your toes wet with some beer.
Should be fun.
Thank you for that so much, Jennifer. Well, that's about all the time that we have for this week. but the current edition of the North Coast Journal is on newsstands now. So go pick up a copy. I highly recommend it. There's some really incredible stories in there. You can also find it 24/7 at northcoastjournal.com. Thad and Jennifer, thank you so much.